My bucolic life, we have 3 city stripes. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I could pick something that will the horses in to the barn, and time to move them out again. Like barking pastures, beautiful farmhouses, the view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.
Hello everybody, welcome back. I am going to be making a dress today that was in a poll on my little Facebook group. I had a few dresses, patterns, and I said, I want to make one, you guys pick. This one was the favorite. There were some others that I will be making, just not yet, but this is the one I'm going to be making here. This version with the sleeves, but I'm actually going to probably be making it closer to this length, okay? And the fabric this calls for is a cotton blend, linen, gingham. It also calls for satin, I guess, for special occasions. And the reason I wanted to make a big dress is I was at the fabric store and they had a clearance on fall cottons. So I got one. So yes, it does have some little pumpkins on it, but it also has, you know, leaves and berries and things. And it's a very lightweight cotton, which I have pre-washed in hot, pre-dried in hot. So hopefully, you know, it's all shrunk down and everything. So that's what I'm going to be using. So let me go ahead and get this cut out. I am going to be cutting out my typical size 16, as you do. And I will be right back. All right, I started to cut this out and I was noticing that they have different skirt pieces for view B than they do for C and A. And the reason is, it's kind of hard to tell in the picture, but view C is actually a straighter skirt and it has pleats. Okay, view C and view A are more of a circular skirt. So they're two different skirt shapes, and I am going to be doing the circular type shape, I believe. Alrighty, I've got them basically cut out, just of the tissue paper. I haven't cut out my fabric yet. And I want to figure out how long I need to make my skirt pieces. So for view C, for my size, it says that the final length is supposed to be 55 3/4 inches from the base of the neck. So I'm just going to put a little clothespin at that point, hold this up to the base of my neck, look in the mirror and see about how many inches I need to shorten to get to the size I want. So when I held it up to me, I want my finished length to be 43 inches. And it said, again, 55 3/4. So I'm just going to subtract that out and see what the difference is. 12 3/4, so we'll call it 12 inches that I need to take off. Now this is the cutting line for C, this is the cutting line for A. If I take my pen and my tape measure and I'm just going to call it 12, take a little line at 12 inches all the way across. This is a circle skirt. So it does have a curve at the bottom, so instead of cutting just straight across, I want to make my little marks and follow them along so that my new bottom cut line is slightly curved also. So there is a skirt front piece and a skirt back piece that looks very similar. So I'm just going to be doing the same thing for both of them. Okay, so I want to take a peek at the bodice pieces here. This is the back piece. It looks fairly standard, cut on a fold, one of fabric, one of lining. I am probably going to do a self-lining on this dress, but pretty basic. It's got a dart at the bottom pointing at a shoulder blade. All is good there. Now for the front, this is a wrap dress and it has two different front pieces. So this is bodice left side, and this is bodice right side, okay? They are totally different. The bodice right side, if I match up the center fronts right here, okay, the bodice right side gets its shaping from a couple darts over here at the side, okay? That's how it's going to get its shaping for this cup over here, which is fine. That's adaptable. We can do that. So I'm just going to set bodice right front aside. Now, from what I can tell, bodice right goes over bodice left. Bodice left is pretty much hidden from this point down. It's just this point up that is visible, okay? But we do have a dart pointing very closely to a very high apex here. And if you've been around, you know me, age, gravity, everything like that. My apex is at least an inch lower than the patterns always call for. So I'm actually going to lower that, but we're going to do it very simply by just redrawing in this case. So what I'm going to do is just put my pattern piece here. I'm centering the center front line on one of my grid lines so I can see that underneath. Putting another weight over here just to hold it. Now, the dart top point for the size I'm cutting is this one right here. All right, so from that point, putting my ruler so it is in line with the grid down below, I'm just going to, from this point, drop it an inch right here to this point. Okay, I just lowered it 1 inch. Then from this point, I'm going to draw legs to connect it to this lower dot for my sized leg. So I'm just going to draw a line there, and voila, new dart. When you have a dart coming in off the side, it makes things a whole lot more complicated, but just a single dart here, I think that this is going to be fine. So that is the only pattern modification I think I'm going to be doing. Okay, so it's time for a philosophical conversation because we're just going to set this aside for a minute. I don't know if you can tell, since the last video clip that I did, I went downstairs, had a cup of tea, had my supper, had a cup of coffee, had a bowl of ice cream, you know, fed all of that in me. You know, starting to get better perspective and everything, came back up because I was really frustrated with myself because that was such a simple thing. And I was really beating myself up over it. And you know what? Things like that happen, especially when you're sewing, you know. The directions, sometimes they skip around, sometimes your eyes skip over things. You've seen that with me. So anyway, stop beating up on myself about that, because I have something new to beat myself up over. Excuse me. So let me tell you what it is. This is the first time I have put this bodice on my dress form, closed it up in the back, you know, and it's going to fit snugly. Not a lot of ease in this thing, okay? Here's the thing though. This dress, okay, I pointed out earlier that this kind of reminded me of this dress. This is a true wrap dress where I can wrap one side over, the other side over, and because it's a true wrap dress, you kind of can adjust it. You have a little bit of wiggle room to put the sides exactly where you want them, okay? This does not. They are set in place. And when I lowered that dart, that was the only thing I was thinking about for lowering the bust. But look, because like on this one, I can adjust it so I know exactly where they're going to cross. With this one, you can't. The crossover is still placed for a very high optimistic bust, you know? So because of that, when I put it on my dress form, the crossover point, which should be under the bust, is way up here, right at the fullest part, which is not where you want it at all. You want it lower. This whole crossover part should have been lowered. And in order to lower that, I have to change the structure of how it's all connected down here. So I'm debating right now about making a whole new top. I'm gonna turn the camera off and think about it for a little bit, but I wanted to tell you my whole philosophical thing. The conclusion I came up to is that, you know what, I'm doing this, and I do my videos because I enjoy it. I enjoy making things, and I enjoy sharing it with people. And so if I'm concerned that, oh, people will see this and they won't watch it or they won't like it or something, you know what? That's kind of missed the point. So, not concerned about that. I'm just concerned about fixing this problem right now, but I just wanted to give you a little close-up view. This is my issue right here. So I'm going to flip the camera back over to my desk so we can work this out. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is take a very good look at this piece. This is the one that has the dart on it, okay? And in order to get a better idea of how to deal with this, I need 2 paper pieces of it. So I just have a piece of craft kind of paper down here, and I am just taking a rough outline of this entire pattern piece so that I can use it to strategize. So once I have it outlined, I'm just going to cut it out. Okay, so I've got my whole little mock-up thing going here. I've got my dart folded into my pattern piece, and over here on this one in the stiffer paper, which holds its shape well. And if we take into consideration that the dart ends about 1 inch below my apex, okay? So if this is the apex, I need this line to be below it. And if I'm assuming that I have 5/8 inch seam allowance, okay, that's going to put it right here. And that's going to mean I need to lower this by at least 2 inches, okay? The bottom has to stay where the bottom is. But I'm going to need this over here to end lower so that the direction that it's going to cross over at the point where my boob is. I don't really care too much where this is right now. The critical part is where it's going to cross right here. And I want it to cross at the point basically where my dart ends, okay? Instead of up here. So, in order to do that, well, it's just below this little grain line. So let me just move this up here out of the way and take this out. If this is where I need it to cross at this point, and this is my shoulder, what I need to do is kind of somehow blend this up here, okay? And I know you cannot see that because it is a pencil. And then from this point, I'm just going to continue to taper it down that same approximately 2 inches. And what this is going to do is on the sides, let's see, where are you? Over here, like on the sides where it's wrapping, it's going to be shorter. So I'm only going to have it wrapping about that much on the side here. And that's going to be fine. If I try, I think, to keep this the size that it is, instead of, you know, a gradual swoop like is intended in the design, I'm going to end up having something that kind of looks like an L, you know, and I don't think that's going to drape as well. So, you know, modifying, it's what we do. Yeah, so basically I'm taking about 2 inches off here. So let me just do this one. Now for the side that has the little pleats on it, I'm gonna have to do something a little bit different. But first of all, I'm just gonna go ahead and trim it. Yep, just going ahead to trim it because at this point, it's gotta be, it's not wearable to me otherwise. So I might as well, you know. Okay. So this is what it looks like. This is what I trimmed off. I'm going to save this piece for a minute because now I have to deal with this side. And this side also has to be lowered by the same amount. But I've got all these pleats over here to deal with. So we're going to have to do something different over here because of the pleats. So what I'm going to do is line up this center front line on the grid underneath it to keep it straight. Put a couple little weights on here to hold it. And I'm going to move these down. If 5/8 of an inch here is my seam allowance, I'm going to draw a line at about 1 inch. I think that's where I want my darts to start. And you can see here at the bottom, I've got a lot of blank space. So I'm going to be taking my 2 inches basically out of this space and moving these darts down. So let's see, if I put a line here at 1 inch, that's where I want this dart to start. All right. So I'm going to isolate the part that I want to lower. Okay, I'm getting a look at this, and these darts are actually going to be a little trickier to move. So just bear with me. They're at different angles. This one is at this angle. This one is at this angle. Okay, so I'm going to move this one down by 1 inch first. So what I've done is I have a line coming across this way and up this way, okay? And then I'm going to also, along the same, parallel to the same stitching line here, I'm just going to move my ruler out a little bit and just draw a line out here, okay? So if I cut across this line, and I need to come up this way, I don't want to cut right at that point. I want to give myself a little bit of wiggle room, so I'm going to draw a line out here that is at the same angle as this dart, just parallel and moving it out, okay? I need to actually turn this so I can get to it over here, and I'm going to cut down this line, down to about my 1 inch level down here, because my seam allowance 5/8, that gives me about 3/8 of an inch here, okay? So I'm holding my ruler at a 90-degree angle to this line. I'm going to fold it over so I have a nice crease right here. Put my ruler on top of that and fold it back up. So I have 1/2 an inch taken out, which will be then lowering this pleat by 1 inch, okay? So now I'm just gonna tape that in place. Okay, so now I have 1 more inch I need to take out because that's what I took off of here, 2 inches, okay? Because I need to make this match. Is this the best way to go around this? I don't know. Okay, so now I'm going to fold this so that these 2 edges here and here are going to match up. And I want this fold line to be just as straight as I can out there, okay? I need to look at it this way. Okay, so I've turned it so my top pleat is now visible. I'm going to put my ruler up here. I got some tape sticking out, which is driving me nuts. And I'm going to taper this fold all the way in. So now I'm going to fold this side back up here. Take my ruler out. So up here at the armhole, if you can see this, it's the same. This hasn't changed up here. I've just taken a little tuck out here. So now these two are closer together. So that's 1 inch gone. And I'm going to take the other inch from the top up here. And that's going to give me about enough room for my seam allowance. So let me just put this line here, and I'm just going to continue marking it at 1 inch until I get right about here, which is the center front position. And then from here, I'm going to just kind of blend it up there. And that's going to take 2 inches off. I may have to adjust these angles because they might not drape exactly right. So at this point, this is my plan. You already saw me construct everything up to a certain point. What I'm going to do is cut out 2 new pieces, okay, and construct another bodice. I think I have an extra yard or so. I'll probably end up having to do the lining out of just a muslin or something, but I have enough of this fabric that I can cut these out. And the back, I need to cut another back out. All right, I'm cutting this out and thinking to myself, since this has so little ease built into it, let me look here. It says that the waist, it says, has 3 inches of ease built in. The bust has 2. I need more than that because this is the bust on this thing is for a 38-inch bust. My bust is closer to 40, but usually there's so much ease built in and I wasn't paying attention. You know, this finished size of this bust is 40.5. I need more than that just so I can move and it's not really binding in. I've already cut out one of my front pieces. I'm cutting this one out right now. And so I had to make an executive decision. Let me tell you what it is. This is my sleeve piece. I got some easing at the top, but not a lot of gathers or anything that I can make up there. I can adjust this sleeve opening when I sew it in because I am going to add some space to the back because I have not cut my 2 new back pieces out yet. So what I'm going to do is add a full inch to each one of these back side pieces, okay? Just so I have a little more ease up here. I guess technically I should have done a full bust adjustment in addition to all of this, but I think that would have pushed me over the edge to try to work that in at this point. So my solution, my easy solution, is just to add a little bit of extra width here on this side seam. That's going to give me an extra 2 inches if I add 1 inch to each side, and I think that that's going to be fine. So with that being said, I'm going to continue cutting this out. I do have enough fabric to cut out the outside layer of everything. I'm going to make my inside lining layer just a plain white. And so, yeah, we're going to hope for the best there. Okay, so just to make this extra fun, I ran out of fabric and I have one more back piece to cut. So I am splicing together 2 scraps. Just folded them over at 90 degrees and pressed a 90-degree edge to it so I can see where it can overlap here. And I want to make sure that it'll fit on my piece. And it does. And it looks like I can actually wiggle things around for about 1 inch. So because of that, I'm going to bring this up just a little bit more so it hides the bottom of those other pumpkins. And hopefully that will blend a little bit more. And I think everything's going to fit. So what I'm going to do is pin where this is overlapping really quickly. And I am going to very carefully, very close to the edge, just run a row of edge stitching across that folded edge to hold it in place. Once that's done, I'll come back underneath and trim off the excess. Good morning and welcome to the next day. So I wanted to see how my newly trimmed, shortened and adjusted and everything piece was going to fit before I went to all of the effort to cut it out and sew it and everything. And so this probably would have been a good idea to do at the very beginning with my other piece, but c'est la vie. Anyway, there will be a seam allowance here, a 5/8 inch seam allowance. So this point here is actually going to be a little bit lower, but I'm concerned that that still isn't low enough for comfort for me. So while I have it on here, I'm going to grab a pen and make a little line where I think it will fit. Okay, so I want to make for sure that this edge of this piece coming down, I want it to be right around here. Okay, for my comfort, that's where I want it. It's going to make the neckline lower, but look, I have another wrap on today. A true wrap, to boost my confidence. I think it's going to be fine. So if this side is going to come underneath here, I'm going to put it another inch lower. Okay, so if this is going to be the seam line, I'm going to bump it out 5/8 inch to get my new cut line, and then I'm going to ease that in. So at about this point here is probably where I'm going to start my ease. So I'm just going to put a little mark there to let myself know. And right about here on the side is where I'm going to end it. So I just put a little mark here on my paper so I can know that's where that's going to blend. And I'm just going to roughly draw it, and when I lay it flat on my table, I'll see how close I came to something that looks reasonable. So actually what I drew while it was on the dress form wasn't bad. I just kind of went off the rails right about here, but I think that's okay. So I'm just going to come along and make a new cutting line, trimming with reckless abandon. Okay, so now that I have this done, I'm going to go ahead and iron it really quick to erase all of my marks so that my pen doesn't go everywhere, and then I can make the same changes on this piece. Okay, so with that, I am just laying this piece on top of this one. This is the one with the dart. And I want my top corner here to match up with the top corner there. I'm just going to pin it together to hold it. I want my side seams to be matched up. I'm going to put a pin there. The shoulder seams up here, let me raise you up. These shoulder seams should be matched up here. Okay. So now I can see there's that little sliver that I trimmed out of the other one. I'm just going to come in here and trim this one so it matches it, and hopefully that will take care of all of my issues. Okay, I wanted to show you one other change. Remember on these pleats, they wanted you to stitch them out. Oh, what is that? Probably at least 2.5, maybe 3 inches out. Okay, and because I'm changing things and changing the position of it, I'm not stitching these pleats out. I'm only pinching them, and what I'm doing is just folding this up to meet here, okay, because that's going to do the same general look from what they want with the pleats opening up like pockets, okay? So I have only pinned it right now, but I've got it over on my dress form, and I want to show you what it looks like. Okay, so I have the top edge turned under about the same amount, 5/8 inch, that a seam allowance would be. So this position is pretty accurate. You can see here's one big old cuppy boob here, and so I have it so it's coming underneath. I have my pleats here just pinned right where the pleats are, and just have a stick pin sticking it into her body to hold it. And you can see how it's actually being held out slightly in front of that center underarm line seam there, and that's why I added the extra inch to both sides of my back piece, just so I would be able to put this on here and have it, you know, with enough ease that I could get the look of a drape and not have it, you know, pulled tight. So that's why this is not totally on the side, but I think it's going to work out. But what I wanted to show you, and let me lower the camera here so you can see, at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to sew the dart seam on, because they were going to have you stitch it like here and here. I'm not going to stitch it. I am going to press it though, because I think that that's going to give me the look that I want. So grab a couple little pins here. So while I have it on her, I'm just gonna stick a pin along that fold line so that when I go to my ironing board, I can press it so that I have the beginning part, that's my seam allowance there, so I can have this part pressed. And I think that's gonna give all the effect that I'm gonna need to help direct these folds here into the proper place. Okay, so I actually recorded this already, but had technical issues, so we're going to do it one more time. My pattern for my bodice right front, the one with the little pleats, that's what we're going to get started with. And remember, when I cut it out so it was the right side of my pattern on the right side of my fabric, okay? One of the first steps we're going to be doing, you know, is marking everything, but it's going to be making these two pleats. Now, if you can look at it, these pleats have arrows pointing to both circles, which can be tricky because usually a pleat will just have an arrow pointing to one circle, which means, like, if it was an arrow just pointing to this side, that would mean you take this side and bring it over there, or the opposite, take that side and bring it over here, but they're pointing to both. That means that they want what is not really a pleat, but like a dart with an open end. And because of that, you have to mark those on the wrong side. So I have taken my pattern paper off, put it onto the wrong side of my fabric, and I've gone around and punched out all of the little circles that go along with my size. There are, 4 for each one of these pleats. There's one over here on the side, not sure what that's for yet. One over here for sleeve placement, a triangle up here, which is marking shoulder placement. Okay, so once I clip my notches, just taking my scissors and clipping them a little bit, wherever the little, there's no notch over here, wherever the little carrots are, all right? And I am also paying attention to where this center front line is, and I'm putting a little line there using my heat erasable pen, which will disappear as soon as I iron it, okay? So once I have all my circles punched out, I can come back, and inside of those circles, I can just stick my little heat erasable pen and draw them in. Okay, do that for all of them. Then, once I have my circles drawn, I get my ruler and I like to connect my dots. So I have a line here and here for one, and a line here and here for the other one. All right, so that's where we are right now. Now, like I said, these aren't regular pleats, they're more like a dart. So I have to I'm just gonna fold one and sew it, and then do the other and sew it, because they're so big and they're so close, it could get a little bit tricky over at my sewing machine. So, say for the first one, I'm gonna stick a pin, big long pin down at the first dot, and come up at the second one, just stick it through, and the same one at the top, put my pin down in the first dot, and up at the second one, okay? So now I have them lined up like this. There's the little heads of my pins there, okay? Now my fabric's very thin, so I can just tip my pin and anchor it into place. What I'm going to do now is go over to my sewing machine, and from the outside I'm going to stitch up to this point, make a little back stitch to secure it, and call that good, okay? Let me go ahead and do that one, and then we'll pin the other. So on their instructions, they're showing you a white colored piece and a dark colored piece. The white one is the wrong side. The dark one is the right side, okay? I have gone ahead and sewed both of the pleat things in there, okay? So this is what it looks like right now. So on the wrong side, which is the white one here, they're telling you press the pleats down. Before I press them down, I'm actually going to press them just in half nicely. It's going to erase my mark and give a nice edge to my little dart there. I'm going to do the same thing to this one down here. Get everything shook out so it's not underneath where it shouldn't be, okay? And press this. And I'm just going out a little bit just so that I have a guideline of how that fold is supposed to look, okay? So now, these are pressed. I need to, on my wrong side, again, this swoopy part here is the top. Here is the armhole, okay? These get pressed down. So I'm pressing it first, the bottom one down like this first, okay? And then make sure I have this opened up all the way, and then I'm going to press the top one down. Okay, so that is it. Now, before I can move anything, I need to get a few pins over here and pin all these where they need to stay. And I'm going to come back and just do a little straight stitch, probably about a 1/4 inch seam allowance, just straight across here to hold those in place. Okay, so this is what it looks like now. From the right side, it's opened up like little pockets, okay? My pleats are where I could stick a little M&M or something in there. That's how it's supposed to be. So that's the whole part of the beginning. Now, I'm going to need to get my back dart, my back's all made up with the darts, and get my fronts, the other 3 front pieces that I have that have a dart made up. So let me flip you back over to the table. All right, so my darts are going to get marked on the wrong side of the fabric pieces. So I'm going to mark the top and both of the little bottom circles, and of course the other ones. Once I have it marked, I am going to go ahead and draw my stitching lines for those darts with my heat erasable pen and fold them up just like I did the other ones, where grab a few pins here, put my pin down in the first dot and back up in the second one down here at the bottom, and pinch it up here where the point is, okay? So holding it like this, I know exactly where that fold line is going to be. Gonna stick a little pin at the top and anchor this one down here, and I'll probably put one in the middle too, just for fun. And that's going to give me my stitching line. All right, so I will stitch it from this outside all the way up, and I'll probably just run it off the edge up here. Now I need to do this for all 4 pieces, so I'm probably going to go ahead and mark and fold and everything, all of my pieces at once, so I can take them to the machine and do all of my darts at the same time. Okay, so I have my back darts all sewn in. I am just hand tying the tips of these because this fabric is fairly thin. With thicker fabric, I don't have a problem back stitching it, you know, if you can do it carefully. But for this one, as you can see, I just make a big loop, stick my pin in at the tip of my dart and pull it, And if I can grab my scissors over here, I'll clip my thread about 1/2 inch away from that knot, and it's all ready to press. So the darts for these are going to be pressed towards the center. Excuse me, allergies or something, I guess. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and just fold it towards the center. It's a very small dart, so I'm not going to be pressing it flat first. As soon as I turn the camera off, I'll be using a fair amount of steam here, but you can see my marks erase entirely and everything looks really nice. So that's what it looks like. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to my other 3 pieces. Hello and welcome to the next day. I started coughing last night. I think I had something go down the wrong pipe or something, so I just decided that's a sign. I'm going to stop for the night. And so it's the next day. We're going to pick up on the other side of the bodice. But I wanted to show you, this pattern was reminding me a lot of actually the pattern for the dress I'm wearing, which I have not done on this channel because it's an older pattern. I'm looking at the date. Oh, 2017, not that old. And it's this one. This is a Laura Ashley pattern. And I love this pattern. Now, this one is a full wrap. This is kind of a mock wrap where it looks like it's a wrap, but the top is just sewn in place like that. This one here, it is a full wrap, but it does have a full circle skirt and everything. It uses a boatload of fabric. But I love it. So I was just going to show you. They kind of rhyme, but if you ever want a full wrap version of it, I love this one. I did make my tie a whole lot narrower because when I made it this way, it was like this huge bow, which was a little outlandish. But if you're curious, it is a Laura Ashley pattern. I think they're out of print, but you can find them somewhere. And that is the McCall's number. So anyhow, let's get back to this darted side of the front bodice. All right, so remember, this is the one where I dropped the top of this dart by 1 inch, just because me. So I'm going to need to punch everything out. Here's that dot again, and I'm thinking this dot probably has something to do with where the little tie gets attached. That makes sense to me, at least at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and, with my punching tools, punch out this dot, my lower one here, and the 2 that go along with it at my legs. A dot over here, a dot over here, and a dot up here for sleeve placement, and of course my little shoulder mark. And you probably noticed I'm usually big at serging around all my pieces. I am not serging around these, even though they're cotton, because it is going to be fully lined, fully encapsulated. I'm not going to worry about it fraying. And this is such a tightly woven fabric that I'm not worrying about it, coming out of sorts just while I'm working on it. So that is why that is. So let me get everything clipped and marked, and I'll be right back. Okay, I've got them all marked, so I'm just going to show you on one. I'm going to do my typical thing of making this enormous dart here. It's very, very wide. So again, I marked my fabric on the wrong side, put a pin down one dot and up the other, and pinch it up here at the very tip. Just going to smooth that out so I have my nice little crease here. Holding it upside down for myself for some reason. Gonna get these pinned in. I'm gonna put one in the middle too, just because it makes me feel better. And once more, when I sew it, I'll sew it from the outside in, tie a knot at the end here, and call that good. I wanted to introduce you to my new workhorse machine. This is mine, she's not for sale. This is a FAF 130 that I redid. She was pretty locked up, but now she's fabulous. This is a German-made machine, probably in the early 50s, I'm guessing. I got it because it's a similar machine in structure and capabilities to my Meister. And if you've been following me for any time, you know my Meister, I love my Meister. It's got family significance, but there is a piece on my Meister that has broken in the casting, and it's impossible to get new parts. So just to preserve her so that I don't do any irreparable damage, I will still use her lightly, but I'm not going to use her daily, This is going to be the new all-purpose machine. So it's fabulous. It does have the embroidery coffee grinder on the back, but I do not have that connected at this point. It's just kind of bolted on, but I haven't locked it into the gearing yet. Oh, I wanted to show you, I know this is kind of silly, but when I decorated her, I don't know if you can even see, she's got big old funky tattoos. I actually used temporary tattoos and then I painted over them with a glittery, color changing blue and purple. My lighting is off there. Blue and purple glittery paint, so it's fabulous. Her name is Yolanda. I love Yolanda. So that is going to be my machine for the day and probably for several days. Alrighty, back over here, I've got all my little darts sewn, and they are bigger darts. So I'm gonna iron them flat first. Try not to steam up my camera. And then once I have that ironed flat, they are gonna get pressed towards the center, which is actually the longer part. This is the side seam. This long part over here is the center. So it looks like this on the outside. Okay, I'm going to do that to my other couple pieces here. Okay, so at this point, I've got everything sewed up. Now I just have a whole bunch of shoulder seams to put in. So we'll just show you on one or two. This is one of the ones that has the dart on it, obviously. So I'm just going to grab one of my back pieces that I can put up here so that my arm holes are on the right side. Okay, so I'm going to pin these, matching my notch up at the top, and sew straight across at 5/8 of an inch, and then press it open. I've got 3 more that are like this, and then I have my one that has the big pleatiness to it here. That one, it's just the same. This one should work. Grabbing one of my back pieces and sew it up there. So when I'm done, I'm going to have all of these back sewn onto a front with the top shoulder seam allowances pressed open. Now, I'm not too worried about the fabric I'm using, but I am somewhat concerned if I was using something like a linen or something. This big, long, diagonal cut on the front, that could pretty easily stretch out of shape if I was using a fabric that was not as stable. See how I'm just, I don't know if you can see off camera, but it fell off the table, okay? It fell off my ironing board. On a loosely woven fabric, just that little act of it flying off the table and the weight of this piece could stretch this out of shape. What I would do if you have a fabric that's, ill-behaved, before you do the work to sew the shoulder seam, put a row of stay stitching down here, at about 1/2 inch, just to keep it in the same size and shape that it is meant to be. Use that or use some fusible stay tape. You know how I love my fusible stay tape, but reinforce that. So now back over here, what I need to do is sew these together. So right now I have 4 separate pieces. I'm going to sew 2 to 2. So let me and I'm only sewing it at this neckline swoopy area here. So let me find one that will match it. So on one set I'm going to have a darted to a darted, and the other set I will have that pleated thing to a darted. So I'm just going to match up my shoulder seam here and over here at the neckline, and just pin it all the way down. This should match up here also. It doesn't say to stop at the circle. I can't tell in the little diagram. There's a circle right here, so I'm going to say we stitch the whole way. So from this edge here, starting at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, come around all the way down to here. Okay, that's for this one, and go ahead and match up the other one, which is the pleated version to the darted version in the same way. While I'm pinning the pleated one together, I can tell that that area did in fact stretch out a little bit. I can kind of ease it and push it back together, but with that, I would 100% recommend before you sew your darts, before you make your pleats, that you put a row of stay stitching or fuse stay tape along this whole edge so you don't even have to deal with that, because if a fabric is, you know, sturdy and lovely as calico is doing it, I can only imagine what linen or something like that would be doing right now. Okay, so I've got these sewn together. I need to understitch to the lining side. Hang on a second. I need to figure out which side is the lining side, because I am lining with the same fabric. This one over here that has pleats on both sides, I don't know which side is the lining there. So I'm going to go over to the one that has the pleats, okay? So I know that this side with my pleats is the front and this is the back. So since I know that, then I can put my other piece over here and place it in the proper way so that this is wrapping that way. And then I know that this, I'm just going to put a little note here over in the corner. This one has a big F on it. That means that is the front. And this side, I'm putting an L with a circle around it, meaning this is the lining side. Just so I keep it straight. So they want you to trim it and then understitch it. I'm actually going to understitch it and then trim it, just kind of feeling obstinate today. And so we put the seam allowances towards the lining side. So that's why I needed to find out which side is the lining side, okay? So on the bottom side, all of these seam allowances are going this way. I'm actually going to be looking at the top side while I am stitching. I mean, you can do it the other way. I've done it the other way too. You can look at the bottom side while you stitch. It doesn't hurt anything. But I'm going to be sewing it right about here, a straight stitch all the way down, you know, about 1/8 to 1/16 of an inch in, just following that seam line over on the lining side. And I'm going to do that to both of these pieces. So I've got my understitching in. If you can see right there, it's nice and secure. So what I'm going to do now is come back on the inside with pinking shears and just trim this fairly closely to that understitching. So I'm cutting about half of my seam allowance out here. It's going to take out a bunch of bulk and let that curve nicely. Okay, so after understitching, I went ahead and pressed the edge, and you can see the understitching pulls it nicely towards the lining side, so that on the right side you have a really nice edge with no stitching exposed. And just because of a few things: 1, I haven't played with lace in a while; 2, I have a lot of lace; and 3, with my faff in its little box of attachments, there's a foot that's supposed to be for putting lace on. So I'm going to run some lace along this edging here. Okay, I am back. I had to take a break because my microphone batteries had died, but they are charged up now. And while they were charging, I went ahead and put the lace on. This is the little foot I was telling you about. It's basically a zigzag foot with very stubby toes and open in the front. And it works really well. What it is you're able to see a whole lot better of what's going on. And it has a little groove here. I'm thinking that's in case you wanted to put cording, a little thin cording or something over it. Because what you do is, and I did put it on the whole way, is I have this opened up, okay, so that this is my right side, this is my wrong side, my lining side. You can see the understitching here. At least I hope you can. So what I did is basically stitching on top of my understitching line with a narrower zigzag, which you can kind of see right here. That's where this foot comes into play. All right, so it's just so that you can see really well. That's all it is, and it works. It's fine. But by putting the lace along on top of the understitching works well, because then when I'm going to turn it to the right side, it looks like this. I don't see any stitching lines or anything like that. It stands up nice and pretty, and it doesn't interfere with the understitching, you know? So I like that. I'm going to go ahead and press this so that it's going to lay nicely. So now that this is pressed, looking lovely. On both of my front pieces, the pleated one and this one, I need to just make a little row of stitching right here, probably about a 1/4 inch or so in. That's just going to hold these two edges together. Actually, I changed my mind. That's what I would probably do, but I am actually just going to run a row of serging straight across here. That's going to, trim off the edge of my lace and get all this nice and evened up. Okay, so just to recap, at this point, I've got my front sewed and my little shorter edges just serged to hold the front and the lining together. And I've got that on both sides. This is the one with the pleats, okay? The other one was the one with the darts. So I need to connect them now. This one with the dart is the bottom, and I want to fold the lining out of the way so I don't attach to it by accident. I'm going to take my pleated one, which is going on top, and starting at the bottom, I'm just going to pin it in place here. And again, I'm only pinning through the top layer of this fabric, not the lining. Okay, now reaching through the back was going to be the easiest way here. I got this other layer down here in the back, and again, I'm pulling the lining piece. Okay, so now that that is done, I have it attached. Oh, where are you? Over here. What I need to do is sew together the side seams, the lining separately from the fashion fabric. So just folding these together, I'm going to pin it and sew my basic 5/8 inch seam allowance and press this open. Stick a pin here real quick. And then for both of my linings and also for both of my fashion fabrics. So the fabric's going to have a little side piece down here sewn on. And then I bring the side seam for the back piece. I'm going to carefully pin this on and stitch it at 5/8 inch also. I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. All right, I've got them sewed, and what I'm thinking is for the fashion fabric part, because I've got so many layers here with all of this stuff going on, what I'm going to do is instead of pressing the seam allowances open like I will be doing for the lining, I'm going to press them towards the back. I think that they will lay much flatter. This is such an awkward shape that just getting everything up onto my little sleeve roll is, I think, the best way to iron all of this. So I'm just pressing it open like that. Okay, so with those side seams pressed, let me raise you up a second here. I'm going to try, I haven't done this yet, I'm going to try to turn the whole thing so it is right side out on the lining side and the garment side here. It's kind of like a puzzle. Okay, these are my shoulder seams lined up here. I'm just going to go shake it out. Go and see if everything falls into place. I'm hoping. Well, it looks like it is. Yay, that's a good thing. Okay, so here is my front, my sides, opening it up. On the inside, it looks like this. Oh dear. Well, that is no good. I wonder what I did wrong here. I see what I did wrong. I need to grab my little sharp scissors here. The lining one, I sewed this little piece to the fashion fabric, which is wrong, This was supposed to be sewed to the lining fabric. So I'm just going to remove it down here really quick. Thankfully, it's not that difficult at this point. And then I need to open up this side seam here. Okay, so I've got this open here, all ready to fix my mistake, which is I need to open up this seam allowance. This is the front seam allowance here. Place the edge of this here like this, and I am just going to run a little row of stitching here at about 1/4 inch just to hold it in place. So now that I have this part here sewn onto the lining like I should, I'm just going to take this other back piece of lining over it, matching up all of my raw edges, and continue this stitching line all the way down at 5/8. Okay, so now it's looking like it's supposed to. Here's the front. Okay, there's the back. If I open it up, the lining is all behaving like it should. So what I need to do now is carefully just take my time and line up these back edges, pin those together. I got to pin the entire bottom, all of the layers together. So on the bottom here, I'm going to have these seam allowances lined up on the sides, but I'm also going to be lining up all 4 layers at the bottom. I'm just going to pin that all so it's nice and straight, and then it's asking you to come back and baste all the way down the center back area here, along the bottom, and back up this side. And I will be doing that on the machine with long stitches at about 1/4 inch seam allowance. So, all right, so I have just ran a basting stitch, long machine stitch all the way around here. But before I go any further, I am going to serge around it now that it's all basted together. So I'm going to start up here, serge down, around, and all the way back up here, just, you know, going over the edge, trying not to take anything off just to make sure it doesn't fray, because all of these edges are going to be exposed. Okay, so now that that is done and everything looks nice and neat, I need to do the armholes. And yes, I do say armhole, I don't say arm's eye, because it just seems odd to me, you know? It's an odd word, arm's eye, arm's side. It's, I don't know. It's an odd phrase for me. I've never felt comfortable with it, so I say armhole. So we are going to do this to the armhole. I'm going to carefully match up the edges, pin them together, do a basting stitch around it, just like down here at about 1/4 inch, and then serge around that so that the armholes on both sides are going to end up looking like this when I'm all done. Okay, I've got it up on my dress form, and this is gonna sound petty, I know, but this is a drawing. This is a drawing. This is the only picture that we have of this dress, and it's on a thin model, you know, God bless her. But because it's a gingham check, it's kind of hard to see. But the edge of this is coming right here. It looks like it's lower, but it's not. That's one of those pleats. It's coming right here, which is actually fairly high even on her body, which is, since they put her on there, it's supposed to be fitting her correctly. And notice how she is posed with this shoulder lowered, which is also going to distract from the fact that this is up too high. I think that that's just a flaw in this pattern. I think that no matter how young and perky your chest is, or the size of it, I think that it's going to be very high, which is going to make it a very awkward wrap style dress. So if you've made this before and you have not had it be too high, let me know. I'm just curious. Or if you have made it and it's been a problem, let me know, because my theory is that this is just a style flaw in the pattern construction, you know, because it's just not comfortable wearing a wrap dress going over there. But anyway, let me show you what it looks like on my dress form now. Okay, so we have the wrap that is coming right here underneath the cup all the way over. And by adding that extra on the side, it's not overly tight, so it actually is loose enough that I get some semblance of a a wrap here, okay? Because when it was too tight, this was just, you know, not very drapey. And we want drapey. That's the whole point of a wrap. So at this point, I feel like I am back where I was about 24 hours ago, but I'm feeling much more confident about this. And so I think I'm ready to move on now. I believe we are going to be tackling either skirt or sleeves or something. It looks like skirt. Why won't we do sleeves? I think I'm going to want to do sleeves because it'll be easier to put sleeves in when you have a very small piece of fabric to maneuver around than when you have the full skirt attached to it. It's a big skirt. So I'm not going to do skirt yet. I'm going to skip over to sleeves and then we'll go back to skirt later. Alrighty, so to get started on these sleeves, we do have a few dots up here on the top, and it looks like they're going to be having us put stitches, easing, not gathering, up there. And they're not going to be pulling in a whole lot. There shouldn't even be some puckers up there. So I am going to go ahead and do the 2 rows of stitching just because, why not? But before I do that, as always, I need to go ahead and clip my notches. And the side that has 2 notches is the back. The side with 1 notch is the front. And just because they look very similar at this point, on the wrong side over here, I'm going to stick a letter B for back and circle it. That'll make it easier for me. And then I'm going to go ahead and punch out, excuse me, the little circles for my size. The top one here, which is going to mark where it matches with the shoulder seam, I'm just going to make a little notch there. That'll be easier for me to see. And punch this one out over here. I'm going to be running 2 rows of gathering stitches between these 2 notches on both of my sleeves. And actually, before I run those gathering threads, I'm going to serge around each piece individually just to protect the edges, to keep them from fraying later. So that's going to be my step. Serge each piece, and then 2 rows of gathering stitches here, and I'll be right back. Okay, so they are now calling for putting the hem in the bottom of these sleeves before we set them in, which is a good thing, and they want you to do a narrow rolled hem, easing in fullness if necessary. I, however, am going to use my rolled hem foot on my new faff because I want to, because I haven't. I've never tried a rolled hem foot on this machine. So before I do that though, I'm cutting out a little bit of the seam allowance down here to make sure I only clip that seam allowance up to probably about a 3/8 inch by 3/8 inch square, chopping out of there. That's going to make it a lot less bulky and easier for that little rolled foot to go over. So let me get this one trimmed and I will show you how it works on the machine. We're hoping for the best here. I was just looking at the little booklet for my machine, and they suggest using a zigzag stitch on your rolled hem. I've always done it with a straight stitch, but we're going to give that a try. Okay, so I've got it started. I ran it over. I was trying to get figured out which width of zigzag, and it says a narrow zigzag, so you know that's what I've got. It's about a 2 millimeter zigzag width I'm expecting. So I just tuck it in. I've got it rolled into my little rolled hem foot, and she's taking it right along there. Having this edge serged ahead of time makes this so much easier, but I'm just going to keep on working my way around, and once I get this done, I'll go ahead and press the edges just so that they'll lay nice and flat. Alrighty, so I've got my neat little zigzagged rolled hem in there. It turned out pretty cute. It went awful fast, so I'm happy with that. So now I'm just going to work on setting this sleeve in. So I've got my little bodice area here. This flat part here is the back. Looks like my serging tail around my armhole is still hanging out. Got that clipped off. Okay, so I want to make sure that I'm putting the right sleeve on the right side. So this is the back, and this is the back. I got my little letter B there. So that's good. So I'm going to slip my sleeve under here so that I have everything right sides together. And I'm going to get started by just matching up the, I take it back. I am not going to match up the underarm seam because remember, I added 1 inch over here. So that means that in order for this to be centered, I need to move my sleeve underarm seam about 1/2 inch back. All right, so the seam on my bodice is going to be about 1/2 inch in front of the seam for my sleeve. And I might even have to move it down in a moment, but for right now I'm just pinning it there to get started. Got all my gathering threads up here. I'm going to match up my little notch I clipped to my center top shoulder seam. It did not move, so that's good. Let me pin it in place. Okay. And I should be able to match up this dot where my gathering thread started with a dot over here on my bodice so that those can be pinned together. Oh, just stabbed myself. That's not good. All right, now down here below, it's actually going to work out. I think that because this part of the sleeve is on enough of a angle cut on partly on a bias that it's going to give enough so that it's going to absorb that extra 1/2 inch down there on this side, and I probably will over here too. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just grab my bobbin threads down here, give them a little pull so I can get all of this upper sleeve cap area set in nice and flat. Shouldn't be a whole lot to pull in. I'm basically just taking all of the, there you go, that's what it looks like up there. At the point of the seam line at about 5/8 of an inch in, this is actually setting fairly smoothly, which is what you want, you know. Okay, let me pull the 2 bobbin threads over here on this side now and get this little bit of ease smoothed in. And again, down here at 5/8 of an inch where the stitching line is actually going to be, it's actually pretty smooth. So all of this gathering is just taking all of that extra gap in the seam allowance and cinching it up out of the way. So now that everything is matched up, I can go ahead and stitch it all the way around at 5/8 of an inch. If this fabric wasn't behaving as nicely as it is and my sleeve was not going to be fitting exactly right, I could, you know, smoosh things around down here. I don't think that's a technical term or not, but I can make an inch. I can figure out how to make an inch by, you know, adjusting seam allowances, making one slightly larger than another and everything. But it's working out well. So I'm going to set and pin in the sleeve on the other side, exactly like this. 5/8 of an inch all the way around. Once I do that, I'm going to come back for a second row of stitching. Are they going to have you do it all the way? Yes, they are. So I'm going to do 2 rows of stitching. Usually I only do the second row on the bottom, but it looks like they want it all the way around, so that's fine. First one at 5/8 of an inch, the next one an 1/8 of an inch in, so, you know, at about 1/2 an inch. Okay, so now I have my sleeve set in nicely, double stitched all the way around. So what I need to do now is come back in here, and I've got 2 rows of stitching there. I hope you can see. I'm going to be trimming it fairly close to the second row of stitching, about like that, all the way around both of the sleeves. And once it is trimmed like this, so it's nice and fine, the seam allowance gets pressed out towards the sleeve. I'm not actually going to press it with the iron. I'm just going to let it sit here because that's the way it naturally wants to go because of the bulk of that little seam allowance. So it goes off towards the sleeve. Hello and welcome to the next day. I'm going to get started with the skirt this morning, and I was looking at this instruction sheet. I know, a novel idea, huh? And I just realized that there are pockets in here, and I don't remember I didn't cut out any pockets. You know, and this is all that I have left in this fabric. So I don't think that I'm going to be able to cut out my pockets in the same fabric. I will try to find a off-white. I think off-white, like a unbleached or muslin or something, might do a better color match to this than a shocking white. So I'm going to go ahead, take my pattern back out of the envelope again, find that pocket piece, cut 4 of those out, and then we'll get started putting the skirt together. I opened up the envelope, and the only pieces left in here are just the skirt pieces for this view that have the pleats in it. I don't have a pocket piece. I don't know if I just, tossed it with the scraps when I was cutting something else out, if they omitted it, I don't know. But it is a, standard inseam pocket. So I am just going to go ahead and find a inseam pocket from another pattern because they're all pretty similar, and then I'll just bring that over here. Okay, remember this girl? That's a cute dress. I love that dress, by the way. I'm going to grab the pockets out of this pattern and cut them out, and then we will use it. See that little pattern piece right there? I think that's going to work well. I think I'm going to be able to get 2 pockets cut out of my little scrap, which is good if I can cut them, opposite, so I have 2 opposite ones. I can use the matching fabric for the side that's more visible, and then I can use just a plain fabric for the side that's kind of hidden, because when you stick your hand in the pocket, it kind of shimmies out, and you can usually see, I think it's the back one that's attached to the back skirt that you see a lot more. So that's fun. So I can do one this way and one this way. Well, unfortunately, the only unbleached muslin I have, and I have a big old, super wide piece, it's not pre-washed. And at first I was just going to cut it out because who cares? But if this shrinks a whole lot, that's going to pucker up that side. I don't want to deal with that. So I am going to serge the edge and pre-wash and pre-dry this, but I'll be using it for another project. I just want to have that done before I come back here. So this is polyester. It's not going to shrink. It's a leftover from a blouse in days gone by. And so I'm just going to cut these out. It's a lightweight polyester. It's going to be fine. If anything, it's going to, be kind of slinky and slippery in there, so it should make the pocket lay flatter. Okay, so now that I have these cut out, I'm going to go ahead over to my serger and serge around all of them really quick just to make sure they won't fray. Okay, so the first piece I'm going to work on is the skirt back. That's in piece number 4 here. And there's a few things that I am going to need to mark. This circle here is marking, this is my center back here. This circle is marking where the bottom of the zipper is supposed to go. So I need to punch that out. Find my hole puncher, here it is. And this is cut in 2 separate pieces, so I will be sewing them together. Now this dot over here is the top of the pocket, so I'm punching that out. I don't think that this pocket is exactly the same length as this one that came with it, or supposedly came with it. Mine's a little bit shorter, so I'm not going to mark the bottom at this point, but the top's going to give me the placement I need. And this top dot is going to be basically a seam allowance in, so at a 0.587 inch in this way and that way, that's where my coordinating dot will be on this pocket up in the top corner here. So when I go to match it up, I'm going to match up this dot that I just drew here with that point, okay? This will just fall a little bit shorter. That's okay, that doesn't bother me. So with all of that, I do need to mark this top here. And I'm gonna go ahead and clip my notches. This one, I'm not gonna clip. This is a notch that if I was using their pattern piece, there would be a corresponding notch in my pattern. I don't have that, I'm gonna skip this one. This one down here, the double notch, that's fine. That's for matching the sides up. And I'll clip this triple one. Even though it's not totally necessary, it'll work. So with it marked, I'm going to serge around the edges of these pieces before I even start to attach my pockets, just to make sure they do not fray either. Okay, so now that I have it serged around, I've got my two center backs here lined up, and I'm going to stick a pin up here, actually 2 pins, where this dot is, because that's going to mark where I need to stop sewing, so I just don't keep going. 2 pins is my cheat code to stop sewing here. And I'm going to go ahead and sew this from the bottom up to this point at 5/8 of an inch. All right, so I've got my center seam sewn, seam part pressed open, and I'm going to go ahead and put my pockets on now. Now this is the back piece, so of my 4 pockets, I'm going to be using the ones that match. And I'm going to select a pocket that goes to the appropriate side, put it face down, and where this dot is here, what I need to do is come in. I'm just going to eyeball this, but right about here is 5/8 of an inch in from either side. I'm going to match that up with the dot from my pattern here. And matching up the edges. Go ahead and place this, pin this. Come on. I think I got it a little bit. So my serging went off track there. Clip that. All right, and I'm going to match the other side up just the same as this and sew it straight down here. Now the seam allowance that we're going to use for doing the first stitch on from the pocket onto the skirt is going to be smaller. The pattern calls for 1/4 inch. So I'm going to do that. It's going to be the same seam allowance for both the front pockets and the back pockets. So now that I have them sewn, I am pressing my seam allowances towards the pocket. I'm just going to press it straight down. I turned my iron off because I was rearranging things and forgot to turn it back on, but pretend you see a puff of steam and everything here with the seam allowances pressed out. I'm going to go ahead and do the exact same thing to the front piece. The front is a single piece cut on a fold, so I won't be doing this part, but I am going to go ahead and place these green pockets in the same position that I did here, just matching up the top dot on the pattern to a position about a seam allowance in on both sides here, and serging around the whole piece and stitching these on with a 1/4 inch seam allowance and pressing the seam allowance out. Okay, alrighty, so now I am layering my 2 sides together. So that's my front on the bottom, obviously, because it's got the green pocket. And I'm just going to match this up and pin it straight down here, matching the entire pocket area. Okay, so what I do here, I'm going to do on the other side too, just so you know. This is the stitching for my pocket. The way I'm going to sew this is starting up here at the top at 5/8 of an inch, come down. Okay, now at 5/8 of an inch from this edge, draw a line coming out here. Where these two intersect, that's where I'm going to pivot and turn. Come in here at 5/8, stitch all the way around this pocket. And then as I'm coming up here, I need to cross over all of this. This is that 1/4 inch seam allowance right there. I'm going past that to 5/8 of an inch, making a turn here, and then heading straight down the rest of the way down, okay? So again, starting up here, come down, pivot, come all the way around here, pivot, and then go back down. If you want to back up 1 or 2 and reinforce the little corners here. That might not be a bad idea. Okay, so I've got it sewn together here, you can see. But before I can press this seam allowance, what I need to do is clip the back. Remember, the front had the green, the back had the matching fabric, because I want my pocket to go towards the front, because you know that's easier to put your hand in this way than that way. So what I need to do is clip the back seam allowance just below this pocket. I'm clipping it, to within about 1/8 of an inch of my seam, so that I can put the seam allowance open below that, and then up here at the pocket, it's just going to continue going this way. Do they want you to do it above it also? Well, their pockets are a little bit different. Their pockets did go all the way to the top, so that would be it. Sometimes when there's pockets that are like this, where they don't go to the top, they want you to make another clip and open it. I'm not going to do that. That's a very small amount of fabric and it's pretty thin. So on the other side, I'll do the same thing just for the back. On the back side, the back seam allowance, clip it just below the pocket so I can press this open, press this towards the front. On the pocket that comes with the skirt, like I said, it does go all the way to the top, so then they would have you go ahead and run a row of basting stitches over here to hold it going that direction. Mine's just going to be loose inside of my skirt, so I don't need to do that. Alright, I wanted to show you, I've got my pockets pressed. This is the outside, obviously. So from the outside you don't see any of the pocket, because we did a smaller seam allowance to attach the pocket to the skirt. That means it's set in further. So you have this little buffer area where there's no pocket seams seen, which is nice. And so when you're wearing it and you stick your hand in the pocket, hang on, I got it pressed the wrong way. Okay, so when you're wearing it and you stick your hand in the pocket, if there's a gape, this is what you're going to see, which is the matching pocket on the back. The front pocket is not going to be seen, you know, it's going to be like that. Now the next instruction is to stay stitch around the waistband of the skirt. And I have serged it already, and the stay stitching, which would go right around here at about 1/2 inch seam allowance, just straight stitching, that would make sure that your skirt is not going to stretch any while you're manipulating it. Now, I am not going to put stay stitching in mine because, as you saw, I had to add 1 inch to each side of my bodice. So my bodice is already slightly bigger than the original pattern. So if this happens to want to stretch just a little bit as I am working it on, that's okay with me, because if it doesn't, I'm going to have to adjust some heights to make it work. I am just taking a quick look at the instructions before I sew this on, because I realized that since I already sewed the bottom closed, I would not be putting an invisible zipper in this, because I don't like to sew the bottom part of an opening closed before I put in an invisible zipper. I can do it for standard ones. So I just wanted to double check, and this does call for a standard zipper, which is becoming rarer and rarer, so I'm happy about that. The envelope says they want a 22-inch zipper. So I have a vintage 22-inch zipper. It is the Zephyr zipper. And it says it is magically self-healing, which honestly I wish we all were today, magically self-healing. So that's good. I have that set aside. I'm going to go ahead and get my skirt, get my bodice here, and try to get them matched together. I'm going to kind of turn my bodice this way and put it inside of my skirt, so I have right side to right side. And I'm going to turn my skirt inside out. So now I'm just going to slowly pin it together, just starting with my little center back area. I'm going to match that up first on both sides. And then for my side seams, I need to adjust it a little bit, because you know I did add that 1 inch to it. So on here, my side seam on my bodice is here up front. I added 1 inch here, so halfway between what the pattern had and what it is 1/2 inch, which is right here in the middle. So that's where I'm going to put my side seam And I want to make sure that my pockets, this is my skirt here, that my pockets are facing towards the front. Okay, so this seam allowance here is facing towards the front right there. It's a lot of bulk right here. There is, my goodness, probably about 1/4 inch of stuff going on right here. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that's a bunch. But that's okay. The machine can handle it. Yolanda is strong and mighty. All right, let me just, it looks like I'll be able to just kind of pull the bodice, and that will stretch the skirt and everything will line up. So I'm just gonna work my way around. All right, so it matched up pretty well all the way around. Glad to see that. So I'm gonna go ahead and stitch this. What they call for is 5/8 inch, and then come back and do a second row of stitching about halfway between that row and the outside edge at about 1/4 inch. Okay, so I've got my 2 rows of stitching there. Right here, and what the instructions want you to do is come back and trim it very close to that second row of stitching. Okay, so I understand the concept of trimming it down, you know, taking off excess bulk, especially where you're going to have a zipper involved and things like that. I get that. I just don't feel confident about this. So I have decided that I am going to finish it old school way. This is that seems great stuff. I think I've had this spool since the 80s. It's basically a strip of bias cut, like illusion net, okay? And what you do is just fold it over the edge and run a zigzag stitch over it. And it doesn't add any bulk, but it covers it so that it won't want to fray. Okay, so I've got my little roll just sitting over here on my little peg on my machine. And just gonna slide it over the edge and run a zigzag over it. Okay, and that just makes a nice little covered, contained edge that is no bulkier than when I started. Now that I have it all sewn together, I need to press the seam allowance up towards the bodice, which is kind of stiff. We have a lot of layers going on here. So I am pressing and steaming to get it trained to go that way. Okay, I've got my lovely yellow zipper out here, and the pattern just calls for a very simple, basic center zipper placement type application. And I haven't done one of those in so long, I think I might do it. I'm usually throwing a lap zipper or invisible zipper or something on, so yeah, we're just gonna do a basic centered zipper here. So the first thing I need to do is turn this whole thing inside out and match up that back seam and sew it up with a long basting stitch at 5/8 inch. So I want to make sure that this point here is matched up, and then from here connect it up there and here. And so just using a long basting stitch from this point all the way up, because I am going to be removing that. And the thread I've been sewing this with has actually been a very heavy quilting strength thread, you know. But for my basting stitch, because I want to be able to pop it out really easily, I just went over to my old thread tree and grabbed a very old spool of thread, which comes apart very easily, because that's going to be easier for me to pick out for my basting than my really nice strong thread. So I've got my big old long zipper here, 22-inch long zipper. I got it face up, and I'm going to use my tape, my double-sided water-soluble basting tape. I'm going to start it up here, you know, right about where the top of the zipper head is, and put a row of it all the way down each side. It has a paper backing on it right now, so I'm going to leave that on. I'm using a lot of tape here. Take it all the way down to the stop. I need to get my scissors, clip that, and then put it down the other side right here, and then I'll be right back. Alrighty, so if this is my zipper face up, this is it face down. And I'm going to want to put this side on first. So I've unzipped it, and I'm going to pull the tape, the paper backing off of this tape. So I'm going to line it up so that my teeth are right up against my seam line. I'm going to start it at the top, and I am just lining up the coils of my zipper with the center seam line there and pressing it down. Let me zip my zipper up just a hair so I can see down below here. Okay, so that is pressed down all the way there. I'm going to go ahead and make sure it's pressed well. And I need to pull the paper backing off of the tape on this side of my zipper now. Okay, so now that my paper backing is off here and it's all very sticky, I'm just going to fold it over. You know what, I'm going to go ahead and zip my zipper up all of the way here right now before I finish this. And I'm putting the little tab pointing up here. Let's see if I can adjust you. So now I just need to press down the opposite side of the tape, okay? And again, I'm just leaving these up and free for just a moment. I will deal with those probably by hand later because I am going to be putting a little hook and eye up here. Okay, so because I have that tape on there, I feel very confident of where everything is now. So I'm going to be stitching this from the other side, from the right side. So here is my dress, the back. This is the seam right here where the zipper is going to go down. You need to make sure that when you stitch that you're following the right track, that everything is nice and even. All right, I got it stitched down. What I did is I started at the top, came down, and just a little bit above where the bottom of my zipper is. Let's see it better down here. Here's the stopper at the bottom of my zipper. Probably about a 1/4 inch or a little more above it is where I cut over, okay? So you can see I've got my row of stitching going down, cutting over, and coming back up. I just kind of eyeballed it because my zipper foot was way out here. But I think it was able to get it pretty close. I'm going to go ahead and pick open my stitching here, my zipper basting. Okay, so here it is. I hope you can see it. This is the waistline that got matched up. So if I go ahead and unzip it now, it'll open up well. I think it looks lovely. Okay, now up here at the top, that little thread nest there, so I'm going to look at this one because it's prettier to look at. Turn it under, you know, your call, make it however you want. I just don't want this sticking up out there. So let me go ahead and get the tops of my zippers stitched in like that, and I'm going to go grab my hook and eye. And now that I have my little tape sewn on, I'm just going to grab a little hook and loop. When is this even from here? Made in England. Well, if it costs 15 cents, it has to be quite a while ago, you know? But I'm going to make a little hook and loop here to put onto my very top where my zipper ends. Now I like to put the hook on my right side because when I go to do it, it's easier for me to hook the right and to the left. If you're left-handed, probably want to put the hook on this side. So I'm going to, when I place my hook on here, I want to do it so that the very tip of the hook, like that, is just inside the fabric. I don't want it peeking out, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and sew this one in place right here. Okay, so up here at the top now, I have it secured with my hook and eye up here, and then my zipper head starts just below it. Got my little tapes all fused in, not fused in, stitched in securely, and that is also holding down the seam allowance here so that won't come up. So the top part is all done. What I still have to do is the hem and make the sash that goes with this. Okay, so I want to show you what we have so far. It's looking better. It's looking a lot better. When I put this on my dress form, there was something really weird that happened with the pockets. All of a sudden they were gapey, and they weren't gapey when I had them flat on my table, but when I had them on here, all of a sudden they were weird. And I think that what it is because at this point here, they're cut on a bias, okay? So all of these seams are on a bias cut. And the way that this is, it's a circular skirt, but not a circle skirt. So it's not super full at the hips. It's got some fullness, enough, you know, but not super full. So I think that if there was any strain on it when I was pulling it on my dress form, because sometimes that's a little bit tricky, it probably distorted those bias cut threads. So what I did is once I got it on my dress form, I just pushed my pocket down flat, brought my iron over, repressed it so that the little fold line that I had over there is different now. Now it's a different fold line, but the pocket still looks good. It still works and everything. It's just, you know, slightly different. So if that happens to you, it happened to me too. Here is the back. You know, I think that that looks fine. I honestly think it's going to look fine without the big sash, but I'm going to make the big sash anyway. Now, the way that I did this, my neckline lowered quite a bit, but I still think it's high enough to be respectable, if you know what I mean. And I definitely like this coming in this placement. Up here, it was just too high. It was crazy. So I can see my battery's almost empty. I'm going to go ahead and take a break for a little bit, and I'll be back later. Okay, so this pattern is calling for a narrow hem down here at the bottom. And what I think I'm going to do is do the same, use my little rolled hem foot, just like I did on the sleeves down here. And I pulled what was left on my spool of lace, and I think I have just enough lace to do a little edge around the bottom and also around the sleeves, you know? Yes, I am in my mid-50s, but you know what? I still want a little lace on my dress. I think that that is quite romantic. So that's what I'm going to do. Do this rolled hem here with the same little zigzag that it calls for, you know. Okay, so with the hem done and the lace added, just because I can, the last thing I need to do is make this big sash. So I have this big piece. I have 2 of these cut. And the first thing I'm going to do is sew the ends of them together down here. There's a pointy end and a flat end. I'm going to sew the flat end together so that I end up with one very, very long piece. I'm going to do this at 5/8 of an inch and press the seam allowance open. Okay, so while I was at the ironing board pressing this open, I went ahead and folded it in half and pressed it in half. And I'm going to sew this long edge, but I need to leave an opening near the middle. I'm not leaving it right where the seam allowance is. I'll come past it a couple inches, stop here, probably give myself, oh, I don't know. I bet they get dots on here. Do they get dots? No, they don't. Okay, well, I'm just going to give myself probably about 6 inches open here because I need to be able to turn these big pieces through there. So on one side, I'll start about here and sew all the way down, pivot, and go to the end on this side. And the same thing on here, cross the stitching line, go all the way down, and go to the end. So it has been sewn. I'm going to come back up here and clip off that bit of fabric in the point, and I come like within about 1/8 of an inch of my sewing threads. I don't want to come too close because I don't want anything to get dislodged when I'm turning it right side out. If this fabric was any thicker than this, I would probably be pinking the entire thing off, the entire seam allowance off, but it's not, so it's going to be fine. I'm going to use my lobster claw turner here to flip this right side out. I'm going to stick the rounder side in and get half of this on here. This is a very big sash, I must say. Get it all the way up to the corner, pinch it closed, and then bring it back over like so that I have the beginnings peeking out, and then I can pull that off and pull it right side out. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to this other side. So now that I have it pressed, well, not pressed open, turned open, I'm going to take some time and get it aligned so that I can go over to the ironing board and press it pretty carefully. Once I have it pressed nice and flat, I'm going to go back to my sewing machine and edge stitch it all the way around, and the edge stitching is going to close up my opening, you know, down here. It'll close all that up so it's not visible, and that's going to keep this nice and shapely instead of wanting to go back to looking like this. You know, I want it to have a crisp edge to it. So, okay, decided to do something a little bit different. Let's see if I can move you over here. I am running multiple rows of stitching on my little tie to make it a little more belt-ish because I'm playing with feet today. So I have a foot that has a little guide bar over here that you can move back and forth, and I'm using that guide bar to trace my previous row of stitching, and then just going down. It's out probably about ½ an inch or so, and I'm just doing a row, can't see, a row down one side and then come back a row on the other side. So eventually they will meet up somewhere near the middle, and if there is a space a little bigger or a little smaller in the middle, so be it, that's okay. But it looks like I have room for probably at least 2 more rows on here, and I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. Okay, finally it's done. I love the finished product. Just saying, all of the trials and tribulations with all of this, I think that it was worth it to get the finished product. Now, these 2 layers, they are completely separate. So if I twist a certain way, you know, certain things might be exposed. I might put a little snap there. I haven't decided yet, or I just might pay attention to how I'm twisting in public. I like the lace. I think that little bit of feminine, whatever romanticism is kind of fun here. Sorry, hey, cat. The cat is rubbing up against the base. Sorry about that. That's why you're wobbling. The pocket situation, if you can see right here, they kind of want to get out of sorts a little bit. I'm moving in my pocket up and down. That is because I am convinced that the original pocket that came with this pattern came all the way up and was anchored into the waistline right here. If I wanted to fix this, I could put like a little piece of twill tape, attach it to that pocket, make a little stay and connect that to my waistline so it doesn't want to droop. I don't know that I'm up to that right now, but that would be a way I could fix it. You know, there's probably other ways too. So this has been a crazy saga. I hope you were able to follow along with my chain of events and everything, because I know I'm like future, past, or at least that's the way I'm thinking I'm going to edit it. Right now I'm thinking, how in the world am I going to make this make sense? So hopefully it does. You know, if you get something out of it, I am really happy about that, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.
my bucolic life. Free every city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and sew and spin, and move the horses in to the barn, then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful my houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.